Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's dinner time here on the Chinese Lunar New Year. Are you hungry? Well, have we got a meal for you that will satisfy your tummy? On tonight's menu is a steaming, delicious pot of jiaozi, or Chinese dumplings. Jiaozi? What's that? Well, I'm glad you asked. These Chinese dumplings, known as jiaozi, consist of a thinly rolled piece of dough which contains either meat or a vegetable filling and are one of the most popular and most commonly eaten dishes in China and East Asia. Jiaozi are very popular around the Chinese New Year. This dish traditionally symbolically represents wealth or good luck, depending on the shape and the filling chosen for the dumpling. Now let's jump right into making our beef jiaozi. The spruceeats.com jiaozi Chinese dumplings, adapted by our chef Kianna Moore. First, we start by making the dough. For this recipe, the portion was actually 68 pieces, and because of that, Kiana opted to use 1/3 of all items on the list, which made about 20 jiaozi.
Yeah.
Common ingredients in the jiaozi are flour, which is used for the wrapping, pork or beef, rice wine, cabbage, bamboo shoots, ginger, and garlic. In our recipe today, we have chosen to use beef as our filling meat. It is easily affordable and very popular in many cultures across the world.
I think that should be good enough.
Making the dough didn't take as long as she had expected it to. However, she could not get the dough needed for the first time around, so she had a helping hand help her out. She felt that the waiting time of 30 minutes for the dough to rest was a bit long since it looked exactly the same at the end of the time. But it is very important to let the dough rest after kneading it. This allows gluten strands to relax and develop a good substructure in the dough later on. While waiting 30 minutes on the dough to rest, Kiana proceeded to move on to the next step, making the filling, in which she used extra items such as parsley, paprika, and a teaspoon more of sherry wine, just to add a bit of Bajan to the recipe. Chinese dumplings have a great history. The jiaozi, or Chinese dumpling, originated 1800 years ago as a staple food among the ethnic Han people of northern China. You might be wondering, who invented dumplings? No one really invented dumplings because each culture has its own iteration of what a dumpling is, how to make it, which way to cook it, and various preparations. But most experts believe that for China, dumplings were invented by Zhang Zongji, a Chinese medicine practitioner who lived in the Eastern Han Dynasty, the second imperial dynasty of China that lasted from 206 BC to 220 AD. These ingredients were all thinly cut up and placed in the same bowl until they were ready to be added to the meat. While mixing the filling, it was a tad bit hard to mix with a spoon, so Kianna eventually ended up using God's mixers, her hands. She actually forgot to use the third of the cabbage, which somehow still ended up being more cabbage than meat, but it still worked out according to plan. The 30 minutes was up, and it was time to prepare the dough. She had to knead the dough and form a ball once again, which was a whole arm workout. It was kneaded and divided into three large parts, which were then cut into small, even balls.
Ready?
Her first attempt at making these even balls did not work out so well, but after a while of cutting them up, it became easier. But again, the rolling of the balls was a whole other story. Kianna did not get the ball shape in her first few rolls. Some were a tad bit too big, some too small. But don't be fooled, the hardest part of making the dumplings was yet to come. Making the dipping sauce, to take a break from the arm working, that is kneading dough. The sauce was fairly okay. We had to use soy sauce, dry sherry wine, scallion, garlic, vinegar, and sesame oil, and it was made in no time. Filling and folding the jiaozi. While placing the filling in the dough, you had to wet the edges and place only a spoonful of the filling to the dough circle. Kianna overdid it a lot, which made it even harder later on to create the dumpling folds. Kianna fumbled the bag here. Not one of them came out the right way
One
initially.
side, and then pinch the and then supposed to look like a thing. Listen, don't embarrass me no more. I'm tired now.
Bro, put this into a blooper.
Shit.
It became a competition between her and her friend to see who had a better looking jiaozi. They even tried 6 methods of folding, but to no avail. Personally, I think they did a pretty good job. The cooking of the dumplings. She says this was actually very cool to witness since the dumplings didn't stick together or break apart until the end because some of them had too much filling. As legend tells it, it was a difficult winter, and many were experiencing the ill effects of the cold. To help people warm up, Zongjing took mutton, herbs, and chilies and wrapped them up in dough, then steamed them to bind everything together and keep them warm. These steaming, pillow like treats helped people overcome the cold weather. All the while, the medicinal herbs that Zongjing put inside worked to improve blood circulation and prevent frostbite. After frying them, it was time to taste.
For the Chinese jiaozi, I would rate this recipe a 6 out of 10 based on the fact that the dough needed some sugar and salt, in my opinion. It didn't have much taste while eating it, while the filling now was amazing. That was my favorite part of the whole thing. The sauce is definitely something I particularly don't like, based on the fact that it was like completely new to my taste buds and it had like this weird taste to me. But that's probably because of the vinegar. I'm not a vinegar kind of person. But otherwise, I liked it. I would definitely try it again. And it was slightly amazing, but the dough killed it for me, definitely.